God, he was gone. When I returned home, I cried out in despair, caught in a whirlwind of emotions. I turned everything upside down, but my precious ring, worth $5,000, was gone. That ring, a priceless gift from my mother, held a special value to me. Is everything okay? I asked my sister, to whom I had gladly lent it. But a storm was raging inside me. This is unacceptable, I thought. Please, without further ado, I cut her off as she began to criticize my decision. If you don't stop, I'll be forced to end our marriage, I warned, trying to hold back tears in the face of his blatant arrogance. Fine, I said as my husband prepared to go for the ultimatum. But I wasn't helpless. My name is Nora, I recently turned 37, and I am a former nurse, now a homemaker at the request of my husband Ben. Ben, a former salesman, now worked from home and we lived near our parents. 10 years of marriage had passed and we still had no children, despite my trips to the doctors and his persistent avoidance of clinics. I decided not to press Ben about going to the clinic. Instead, I focused on building our happy life together, even if we did end up without children. My parents, always respectful of our choices, never pressured. But Jane, my mother-in-law, was a different story. She visited unannounced, always asking the same question about her grandchildren. Her persistence became a source of stress, undermining my well-being. Plus, she never missed an opportunity to voice her displeasure about my housekeeping. Nora, is that any way to fold laundry? Her words sounded accusatory. Is there a problem? I asked, perplexed. I fold like normal. Her criticism was unchanged, but she treated Ben differently, emphasizing the importance of supporting her husband. Over time, these little things became a heavy burden. I tried to talk to Ben about it, but it was as if I was facing an invisible wall of indifference. And surprisingly, even Ben was starting to add to my worries. About your mom, I began cautiously, her words hurt me. A conversation with Jane seemed inevitable. You chose me as your wife to build a life together, remember? I reminded Ben. So please pay attention to her words. His excuses and pleas to do chores when I was already swamped with work were beginning to bore me. Ben avoided confrontation with strong-willed Jane, preferring to shift the blame to me. He believed that being a housewife was not a job and constantly underestimated my efforts. I managed the house and tried to maintain my relationship with Jane, but now Catherine, Ben's sister, was coming into play. Catherine, my peer and also married, suddenly became a frequent visitor after a quarrel with her husband. Unlike Jane, Catherine wasn't critical, but her constant unannounced visits and desire to take possession of everything in sight was beginning to get annoying. Hello, Nora. What a lovely bag, she exclaimed on another visit. And those shoes. I bet you have a lot of expensive stuff. Why don't you give me something? I was puzzled. Those things I bought with my own money, before and after the wedding, I explained, trying to hide my irritation. Maybe you should buy them yourself? I suggested to Catherine, catching her eye on my things. Unfortunately, I don't have the funds for that, she admitted, and with hope in her eyes, asked me to lend her something. Her attention turned to my diamond ring. It looks perfect on my finger, don't you think? She exclaimed, holding out her hand. This ring wasn't just an expensive item, it was a part of my soul, a gift from my mother on my wedding day. I couldn't afford to give it away, even despite her pleas. How wonderful, Catherine said ironically when I firmly refused. She laughed, clearly displeased, and I decided that I should hide the ring better. Perhaps it would help me avoid similar situations in the future. After a trip to the store and a brief conversation with a neighbor, I returned home. It was immediately apparent that something had changed here. The furniture in the living room had been moved, the items in the bedroom and pantry rearranged. I thought of Ben. He worked from home, and if something major had happened, he would be sure to notice. Ben, it seemed, had to know what was going on in the house. I knocked on his office door, disrupting his work, which he didn't normally welcome. But the situation demanded my intervention. His response was curt and surprised. What's going on? Ben exclaimed. I explained to him the change in the house and my suspicions. That was my mother, he tossed back, getting ready to leave. I'm busy right now. Ben's words made me uneasy. I ran to the bedroom, opening the closet where the ring should have been. But it wasn't there. Oh my God, the ring is gone, I exclaimed, unable to contain my emotions. Ben entered the bedroom, attracted by my cry. The ring is gone, Ben, what do I do? I asked him, close to panic. Then he gave me the shocking news, about the ring. Mom took it for Catherine. She wanted to take it herself, but Mom helped since Catherine was busy. I couldn't believe it. How could Ben give away such a valuable item without my consent? How could you do that without asking me? My words were harsh and direct. Ben suddenly blushed, his voice louder. Don't come to me with complaints. I care about you, I support you, he said. This isn't about whether or not you support me. I want to know why you gave the ring away without my knowledge, I insisted. His anger was building and he shouted, if you don't stop complaining, I will divorce you. At that moment, I felt my patience breaking. Why should I tolerate such treatment? I couldn't keep quiet any longer. Okay, then let's end this, I said, deciding it was time to end our marriage. I won't let you treat me like this anymore. I pulled a piece of paper out of the living room closet, the divorce papers Ben had once filled out in a fit of anger, and tossed to me. I couldn't bring myself to throw them away, and now seemed like a good time to use them. Here are the divorce papers you signed during our last fight, I said, holding them out to Ben. I'm going to file them right now. Well, we're complete strangers to each other now, Ben replied, and his voice sounded frustrated. At that moment he handed me the papers, filled them out, and tossed them in my direction. I kept them, not knowing that one day they would come in handy. I quickly packed my things, and it turned out that I didn't have much to take with me. My suitcase was smaller than I expected. Goodbye, may you be forever happy with your mom and sister, I said as I left the house. As I walked away, Ben seemed to call my name, but I didn't look back. It was too late. I filed for divorce and returned to my parents' house. After a few days spent in front of the TV, suddenly the phone rang. I quickly picked up the phone, but the call was cut off. Then an incoming call appeared on my phone screen again. Catherine's caller interrupted my hesitation about whether to answer the call. After several missed calls, I finally picked up the phone. Hi, what's going on? Are you finally free? She asked in an urgent tone. Her voice sounded harsh and loud, and I almost pushed the phone away from my ear. I've tried calling you many times. Why didn't you pick up? She insisted. I apologize, I've been busy, I replied, trying to remain calm. Look, I need your help, and fast. The police are here, get over here, Catherine said and hung up. I hurriedly packed my things and left my parents' house, heading towards the reunion site where Catherine happened to be. Finding her without difficulty, I walked up to the banquet hall building. Hey, Nora. What a long time it took you to get here, Catherine greeted me. Come on, explain everything quickly, she nudged me forward. Inside the banquet hall, there were many familiar faces from high school, and I remembered that I couldn't attend the reunion because of Ben not letting me go. Catherine called for a police officer, and I noticed his awkward smile toward me. Something was wrong here, and I felt like I was about to find out what it was. An officer named Matthew stood in front of me, blocking the path of Catherine, who seemed to be trying to find a way to evade responsibility. He accused me of stealing the ring, which was a clear misunderstanding. Nora, you really did give me that ring, didn't you? Catherine asked, trying to avoid the accusation. Her voice sounded insistent, and she looked at me with pleading in her eyes. I remained adamant. My mother took that ring when I wasn't home and you are wearing it without my permission, I stated. Catherine's frustration was obvious, but I was firm in my decision to return the ring. If you return it now, I won't make things worse. But if you don't, the consequences won't be long in coming, I continued. Matthew stepped forward, his authoritative presence emphasizing the seriousness of the moment. Finally, Catherine gave in and held out the ring to me. I would appreciate it if you would give it to me, she said, trying to save face. She clearly didn't realize what was going on, or pretended to. So, maybe we should take this up with the police? I suggested, confidently and loudly, getting everyone's attention. And your husband should be here too. I know you're living apart now, but I'm sure he'll be here quickly when he hears about this. The volume of my voice filled the hall, and all eyes were on us. Catherine looked puzzled, and Matthew was ready to intervene if necessary. The situation was tense, and I was determined to take it to its logical conclusion. When Catherine suddenly popped out of the banquet hall, her face lit up with the color of shame and her eyes filled with tears. The words "this is awful" were the only things she was able to squeeze out before escaping the eyes of those present. Her reaction emphasized the need for her to take time to reflect on her actions and their consequences. Feeling uncomfortable about interrupting the fun of the reunion, I apologized to my former classmates and followed Catherine out. Matthew, who had recently become a police officer, expressed approval when I returned the ring. I'm sorry, Matthew, I said, recognizing the awkwardness of the moment. Now that you're on the police force, you're coming to me for help. I was sure Catherine would show up at the meeting with the ring. She'd even told me she'd wear it when I called Ben to inform him of the divorce. If she had returned the ring right at the meeting, maybe she wouldn't have been so embarrassed. Too bad her act resulted in public humiliation. I was distraught at what happened in my absence. I had originally asked Matthew to contact Catherine, but to my surprise, she called me herself. Don't worry, she said. Why don't you attend the reunion? After all, Catherine's already gone. With permission from the meeting organizers, granted by Matthew, I joined the event. Nostalgia swept over me and I enjoyed reminiscing about my high school years. After a while, Catherine seemed to feel out of place and, not wanting to stay in the town where she had so recently been overwhelmed by turmoil, packed up and left. Catherine seemed to have found reconciliation with her situation, but to my surprise, this turned out not to be the case. Her current whereabouts remain unknown and it seems that our paths will not cross in the future. Apparently, she is having a hard time coming to terms with the idea that she can no longer live in the parental home she loved so much. Jane, her mother, must be shocked by the sudden departure of her daughter, who left without revealing her plans or announcing the divorce, leaving her mother alone and sad. Jane and Catherine seem to be facing the consequences of their decisions. Meanwhile, my ex-husband Ben recently tried to rekindle our relationship. He called me sobbing into the phone, but I realized that a reunion was impossible. Ben seems incapable of handling household chores, which probably exacerbates his condition. I remember how he treated me and appreciate the time we spent together, but a mutual friend of ours recently saw him at the supermarket in a state of neglect and with a basket full of frozen food. This confirms that Ben is worried about our past relationship and how things have turned out. The neighbors seem to be gossiping about him, seeing him in this state. Ben, Catherine and Jane need time to reflect and perhaps rethink their actions. Unlike them, I have been able to return to my nursing profession, which I have always loved, and now I am fully committed to it, finding fulfillment and joy in it. Divorce has allowed me to find true happiness and valuable lessons from interacting with these three people. I learned an important lesson: avoid toxic relationships and live according to my values without comparing myself to others or wanting what is theirs. This is the key to a happy and fulfilling life.